This is what we've got coming up for you in today's show.
I think a lot of people kind of go into it thinking, oh, well, I'm good at spelling, so I'll be able to do it really easy. And there's a bit more to it than that.
Welcome to the All Things Books Show, hosted by award-winning best-selling mystery author Dawn Brookes. Publishing has changed beyond recognition in recent years. Join Dawn as she interviews authors, narrators, and many more from across the creative community. This inspiring and informative show is for readers and writers.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the All Things Books Show, and today we'll be speaking to proofreader and editor Abbie Rutherford. I'll just bring her in now and say hello. Hi Abbie, welcome to the All Things Books Show.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So Abbie is an editor and a proofreader, but today we are just strictly speaking about her proofreading side of things. So Abbie, yes, let's start right at the beginning. How on earth did you get into proofreading?
It's a bit strange, really, because prior to doing this, I was a social worker. So, yeah, a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, very different.
I think when I was younger, I always loved English at school, and I had planned to go and do an English lit degree. I don't know what happened, but I decided not to do that. I think I was concerned about what sort of job I'd get afterwards. And I think I also, in my teenage years, was in I want to save the world kind of, So I ended up going to uni and doing sociology and psychology. And then I trained to be a social worker. Did that for quite a long time. There's only so much you can kind of take of that. Had a few health issues, decided to have a change, went back to my original love. I've always loved reading, went back to my original love and did some courses in proofreading.
Okay.
We are.
I was about to come on to that. Is there any formal training for proofreaders? What is required to become a proofreader if anybody's interested in taking it up as a career?
It's not regulated as such. So at the moment, like a lot of kind of things like counselling and other stuff, anyone can basically set themselves up. But I think a lot of people kind of go into it thinking, oh, well, I'm good at spelling, so I'll be able to do it really easy. And there's a bit more to it than that. Yeah. So I'd say the kind of industry standard courses are with the Publishing Training Centre or the Chartered Institute for Editing and Proofreading. They both run really good proofreading and editing courses. And I think if you really need to do those courses to get an idea of what's involved, because there is far more to it, like I said, than people expect. Plus, also, I think if people are looking for a proofreader, you're going to want somebody who's been trained in it,
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree. And I think I read on your website you've done an English degree as well. Did you mention that, or was I imagining things?
No, you haven't imagined things. I haven't mentioned it. I graduated this year with a master's in English with a distinction. I don't know how I managed it, but I did.
Oh, distinction! Well done. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're hard to come by, aren't they, in a master's?
Apparently. Apparently so, yeah. I don't know how, because, I mean, it's been over 20 years since I was last at uni. So, yeah, I don't know how I managed to pull that off, but I did. A lot of hard work, mind you.
Yeah. Well done, especially in English. I did get a distinction in creative writing, but I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to show it. So why should authors and publishers use a proofreader? It tends to be the poor relative of editing, doesn't it? And people seem to think it's an optional extra. Tell us why it's not.
There was I think it's on Reety, I saw quite a good quote, and I think it was that the copy editor picks up what the author's missed, and the proofreader picks up what the copy editor's missed. So it's, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and none of us are perfect. It's impossible to be perfect. And with copy editing, there's so much that goes into that. You know, you're not just looking at the grammar and spelling and all that. There's all timeline issues, keeping character consistency, all that sort of thing. Yeah. So with all the will in the world, plus the other thing is, I think that people don't realise is that when you're going through the process of making your changes suggested by the copy editor, things can be inadvertently introduced. Mistakes.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, even little things like a double space here or whatever.
Yeah.
So you really need that extra pair of eyes to check that everything's okay. Even with traditionally published, if it's gone to a typesetter, if we're looking at like not digital publishing, traditional as in, you know, Penguin, blah, blah, producing paperbacks. They always go to typesetter, and the typesetter can introduce errors as well. So you need that final look over them to check that nothing's been introduced.
So, I mean, it's basically it's the final battalion, isn't it? It's a bit like if you go into war, that's the final line.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, and another thing I was sort of thinking, what about ARC readers? Is that good enough? Could that be used instead of a proofreader, or not really?
No, I'm not being funny, but a lot of the stuff like formatting issues, I won't know. We're governed by a whole set of publishing conventions. If you look in, there's a book called New Hart's Rules, which basically set out is those things like what you set in italics, what you set in Roman, how you set out dialogue, you know, the punctuation around dialogue with your dialogue tags and your action beats. It's more, like I say, it's more complex than purely just saying, oh, look, we've spelled something wrong.
Okay.
So, yeah, ARC readers are great, and they can pick things up because proofreaders miss stuff too, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and they can be great for those certain things, but I wouldn't solely rely.
No.
I wouldn't solely rely on that.
No, I do know, well, one author in particular, and maybe more, that don't use editors at all, just use their ARC readers beta team to do editing and proofreading. I don't think I'd ever be that confident. Anyway, so you would say it's not an optional extra, it is highly important if you don't want to miss things that other people have either missed or introduced during. Absolutely. And I know when I'm going through the edits from my line editor, copy editor, and I'm going through them, and there are errors, and my proofreader picks them up.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, my ARC team sometimes pick up tiny little things that the proofreader might have missed, but not big things. So how long does it take on average to proof 1,000 words? So let's try and calculate then how long it takes to proof a book.
Do you know, I've never actually sat down and timed how long it takes. I think each project's so different as well. It's probably more straightforward when I'm proofreading for publishing houses because they will have been copy edited. So it's a lot more straightforward. Sometimes with independent authors, if they've decided to skip the copy editing process and just go for a proofread, it can take a lot longer. I'd probably go...
Because you're basically copy editing.
Basically, yeah.
A proofreader price.
Sometimes that does happen,
Yeah, I say that.
Yeah. And it's you could do the basic, but I will add in comments if the author doesn't know the conventions around how you set grammar out around in dialogue, just for an example. Or that like an ellipsis character is not 3 full stops. There's an actual character for it. I will pop a comment in, so it takes longer. So it's quite difficult.
And where do authors find that character if they're looking for it, not having watched this and thought, oh dear, is it really not 3 dots? Where do I find that?
Control, Alt, and full stop.
Is that in Scrivener, Word?
On your bog standard keyboard. Don't ask me about Mac.
I use a Mac, you see, and Command usually takes the place of Control. Okay, so we've learnt something already. There's a special character for for your ... Don't you dare use full stop. So what are, I mean, obviously that's one of them. What are the most common mistakes that you would come across when you're proofreading a manuscript?
That's definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Probably the most common, I would think. I mean, I totally understand. People don't even realise. Before I started proofreading, I didn't even realise. Do you know what I mean?
No, I mean, I'm going to hold my hands up here. I did not know that.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
If you were being, I don't think it would. I don't know. Would it matter? I don't know. No, probably would do. If you think about it, if the way you're formatting, if you've got 3 separate dots, because there's 3 separate characters, there's that chance that one could fall onto the line below.
Yeah, and I've done that actually in a blurb, and then I noticed it on Amazon in the blurb, and I thought, oh yeah, there's 2 dots and then a thingy and then another dot on the outside of the quotation mark. But I'm not sure how you correct it in a blurb on Amazon. Well, I suppose same way. Use your keyboard, I guess it would come up.
Yeah, because it would keep it as one. It's one unit, isn't it? So it stays together.
And then it can't be split up.
Yeah. Any
other common errors you come across?
Again, I think around dialogue, when people are, when you're using the, I don't know, Jane said, they'll end it with a full stop rather than a comma. So that's quite common. People don't know that. It's like, I see a lot of writers read a lot. And but when you're reading, you don't really take that much notice unless you're really thinking about it and considering it. So issues around dialogue and how to set those out. Homophones can sometimes trick people up.
Sorry, what's that?
Words that sound similar but are spelt differently. So,
of course.
Bear is in grr.
Yeah.
And bear is in naked.
Yeah.
And of course, Word won't pick those things up if you want to spell check through that. They're not going to be picked up because they're spelled correctly. Then they are essentially right. So usually one of the ones I find, or 2 that people usually get mixed up with is discreet and discreet.
Yes. Yeah. I had a reviewer pick me up on that, and even my editor had missed it. Go on, explain the rule. So, which my reviewer pointed out eloquently.
You've got discreet, DISCREET, which means you're doing it quietly, like so it's not noticed.
Yeah.
And then you've got discreet, DISCRETE, which means separately.
Yeah.
So separate things, separate basically. So that's what that means.
And I one of my biggest faults was I used CRETE when I meant EET. But I don't do it anymore since that thanks to that reviewer.
Yeah, it happens.
But so that's a common error. Discrete dialogue and tags and where to put your commas and full stops. I mean, that's one of the things because I didn't do I did English at O level, showing how far back I go, and all my my English language has all been learnt from reading. So when I started writing, it is very different. And at first, I mean, obviously my editor had a lot of work to do in the beginning, but I am a lot better now. But we'll come on to programs that can help as well. In fact, we're going to come on to programs that can help. Do you use yourself any software programs to assist you? And would you recommend authors, publishers use a particular piece of software to put the manuscript through before they send it to a copy editor, for instance?
Right.
Or are you anti them altogether?
No, I'm not anti them. I think if anything helps, then great, I don't think you can always rely on how accurate they are. For me, I use kind of the bog standard stuff. I'll run a spell check first. Even that comes up. There are issues with using that, and you can't rely on words spelled.
Yeah, I agree.
The only software I use is something called Perfect It, and that's probably, I don't know how many writers would use that. I think it's probably more editors and proofreaders who use that. It's a macro, and it basically throws up things. It's really handy for consistency. So it throws up inconsistencies in spelling, hyphenation, capitalization, and that's really handy because when you're trying to juggle all that stuff, when you're proofreading, it's you can forget, do you know what I mean? And it just speeds things up quickly, and you can get a good snapshot quickly. You can also then get in touch with the author or whatever, or check on the house style sheet.
And see if that's a common error throughout. I use Pro Writing Aid myself, and that does a similar job. Obviously, I don't use it instead of. I use it before to cut down the errors so that my copy editor and then my proofreader can concentrate on, the real stuff rather than having to pick up silly little errors that a piece of software can pick up for me. I've never used Grammarly. Some people I know recommend Grammarly, but those are the bits of software. And actually, if you want to make your copy editing and proofreading that little bit quicker and therefore hopefully that little bit cheaper, it might be worth using one of those aids.
I think they've definitely got the value. Like I say, I wouldn't. People are going to sell you. Probably will say this anyway because your job, you want people. Do you know what I mean? You need work.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Genuinely though, I wouldn't solely rely on that. I definitely think they can help, and I don't think there's an issue with using those things. But it's a bit like me using Perfect It. I wouldn't solely rely on that. And it's something I always run it at the start of a proofread because that in itself, it's a computer software. Sometimes that can bring up errors itself. So
I agree. And I tend to use it. I basically do my first draft, then I do my own edits, be they multiple or just one pass edit, whichever is required. And then I put it through Pro Writing Aid. Then I send it to a small scrutiny team that I have who look at it. And then I send it to my copy editor. And then she still finds stuff. And then, of course, which just shows none of these programs will do it all for you. So then she does a style guide, etc. And then once she's finished her bit, that's when I use a proofreader for that, as you say, that final pass, just to make sure there's nothing. And then I use an ARC team, and of course there's usually just some small inconsistency. And I find with ARC teams, each one has a different bugbear that they'll pick up, which is wonderful because, and that's really useful, I find, just to pick up stuff. So where does a proofreader / editor, where does your work come from? Do you have to advertise or have you got...
I use social media quite a bit. Most of the stuff I talk about isn't anything to do with proofreading. I do share some things, but to be honest with you, it's something I started using more recently. The past 2 years have been so crazy with sort of working and completing my masters. It's been hectic, but I'm on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I've got the website. I'm on LinkedIn. I still don't understand LinkedIn, but I'm trying to.
I don't get it at all. I can't get it. Just don't get it. Please, anyone, if you're an expert in LinkedIn, contact me. You can come on the show and explain how LinkedIn works, because I have no idea.
No, me neither.
Yeah.
A lot of my work most of my regular work comes from publishers. And then I have a few independent authors as well who use me regularly.
So did you contact these publishers in the first place, or did they reach out to you? How did that start?
I was cheeky and I just got in touch. That's not really cheeky, is it? Do you know what I mean?
No, it's marketing.
Exactly.
I'm a proofreader. Do you need my services?
Basically, yeah. And then I've proofread for some publishers, and then people who organised their editorial schedule, moved to a different publisher, and then they came and asked me if I could do work for them, because obviously I'd worked with them for the previous publisher. So it's all kind of like that, really. Yeah.
And do you have a lot of work? Does it go in spells? Are there busier times of year, or is it consistent throughout the year?
I'm quite lucky in that one of the publishers sends me, I have regular work with them, monthly regular work with them, so that's brilliant. But yeah, and then it sort of depends on if anybody else gets in touch. It kind of ebbs and flows, but so far I've had a regular stream of work coming in.
Yeah. So if you say you were, how much time do you allocate to a book? So say you've got a 60,000 word book, and somebody asks you, how long will it take you to do this? Do you say, what would you say off the top of your head?
For a proofread, I would say 2 weeks. Give me 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah. Obviously, unless it's like a big stonking 500-page. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
130,000 word tome.
Then if you're asking me to proofread War and Peace, it'll probably take me a bit longer. Do you know what I mean? But
I think War and Peace needs a proofread to condense it and say, you don't need this. It's too long-winded. Cut it out. That was written in the day, because I've read War and Peace. Believe me, it took me about 9 months.
Wow.
I did really enjoy it once I got into it. And I've read almost every work of Dickens, but they wrote in the days when it was fashionable to waste words, wasn't it? Yeah. When it was, that proved your intelligence. And nowadays we're told, no, if it really doesn't add to the story, don't include it, get rid.
I don't know if as well, some of that came from, I don't know in relation to Dickens and stuff, but I know certainly kind of in the 19th century when a lot of books came out in serialized form, and you had all the Penny Dreadfuls and things, and
that's true. Yeah,
were a lot of writers were actually paid per word. Yeah. So in a lot of them, there's a lot of repetition, especially in the old Penny Dreadfuls. There's a lot of the repetition because they're trying to obviously boost their income.
Actually, yeah, and I think Dickens was probably a serialized writer. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but I think he probably was. Well, and it's interesting, but it is interesting how much shorter and less people are writing literary fiction, which obviously some people still like to dabble with words and play with words rather than talk about genre fiction. Which leads me nicely on to, do you have a preferred genre to, we'll talk about read first and then edit and proofread.
Reading, I'm quite eclectic. Kind of depends what mood I'm in. I do really like a good psychological thriller. I really like to get kind of underneath the character and what makes them tick.
That's your sociology and psychology background, isn't it?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It does depend on what mood I'm in. I think if something moves me, I'm happy. Basically, I want to feel that.
Yeah.
Emotion.
And in terms of proofreading, anything, or do you have a particular specialism that they come to you because this is your bag, you're good at this, and maybe more relating to editing, isn't it, than proofreading? Because proofreading, not quite the same.
I'm quite lucky with the proofreading because of the different publishers I do work for. I have a nice mix of fiction books, ranging from sort of women's fiction, proofread literary fiction, to thrillers, detective, crime, psychological suspense. But also I've proofread quite a lot of non-fiction stuff as well. So it's nice to have that variation, to be honest. And I think it's probably good for me as well, and for the editing side of stuff, because I'm not just focused on one particular genre. I'm quite lucky to work on the whole range.
So if you're editing, do you do structural editing as well? I know.
No, not at the moment.
No. So you do with your line editing then, or your copy editing. In a way, there are certain tropes to each genre, and are you familiar? Did you have to research all those tropes so that you can pick up whether this is fitting in to the right genre?
Certainly, yeah. For editing, I have obviously read books on writing in the different genres. I would not be asking if somebody came to me and said, "Can you edit my fantasy novel or my science fiction novel?" I would be like, "No,
no, wouldn't have a clue." Yeah,
no, it's not my. Don't get me wrong.
No, I know what you're saying.
I really like Lord of the Rings. I've read the books. I like the films. I'm quite partial to Game of Thrones, and I've read Song of Ice and Fire. I've read the books, but I haven't read enough of that, I don't think, to
know the tropes.
Yeah.
So is there anything you wouldn't proofread? Anything that totally offends you? I mean, like, I suppose it's a bit different proofreading to audiobook narration, because obviously narrators might say, well, actually, I really don't want to do that. I'm not mentioning any genres.
Yeah.
Is there anything? I'm not going there. Is there anything you wouldn't touch?
From a proofreading perspective, probably not, no.
Because it's different, isn't it? It's a different job. Yeah.
Also, you're talking to an ex-child protection social worker. It takes quite a lot to shock me.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not easily. I think with certain genres, I would proofread it, but I think if somebody asked me to review, even just like review something like erotic fiction, it'd be like, how do you do that? Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah.
But I would proofread it.
Yeah, because proofreading, it's the same whatever genre you're looking at, isn't it? The same mistakes, same errors.
Yeah.
So, what? Let's see. If there's any authors watching this, what should they, and they're new to proofreading and they've avoided it, thinking it's an optional extra, and now realise it's not, and they should probably think about proofreading, what can they expect to pay? Is there a range?
I think it varies from proofreader to proofreader and what they set the rates at. Basically, there's no kind of standard. I know the Chartered Institute for Editing and Proofreading, they suggest a fee of £26 per hour. Personally, I know sort of when I was sort of setting my prices, I kind of wanted to be able to give an author a complete price. So they tell me what the word count is, I will tell you how much it's going to cost in total. I think if you're going into hours, it becomes a bit more sketchy, because with all the will in the world, sometimes you don't know how long things are going to take. So it does vary. You can charge by the hour. I charge per 1,000 words.
Yeah.
Like I say, mainly for that reason, so I can give
that. I mean, as an author, I prefer that, because then you've got clarity of how much it's costing. Do you do an example proof or edit beforehand? Do you prefer to? I mean, proofreading maybe not, but editing, no, you don't look at it.
Editing, copy editing, Proofreading, no.
So, which is why you end up copy editing your the books for these people.
That's probably something I actually maybe should start thinking about. I don't know.
Do you tend to? Would you recommend? Because I used to use my copy editor for my proofing, and then I moved on from that because I felt it needed a separate pair of eyes. And would you recommend that they do the same? If you were copy editing, would you say go somewhere else for your proofreading?
Absolutely.
Etc. Yeah.
Definitely. You know,
you do need a different head, don't you? And a different pair of eyes. Because my editor's edited almost all my books now, and she's familiar with my writing style, and that can be a very good thing. But equally, it can have its downsides, because, like like me, when I'm reading my work, sometimes I expect to see something and I see it, even though it's not there. So, so yeah, it is good to get an extra pair of eyes, isn't it?
Definitely. I think even sort of as the editor, you become just that little bit too close. You need that other person, because with all the will in the world, like I said, we're all humans. You can't.
Yeah.
It's impossible to catch absolutely everything.
Yeah, and it's not criticism, is it?
No, not at all. No.
No, it just means the more eyes on a manuscript, the better it is. As
Definitely.
long as you're not asking for the opinion about the about the content, otherwise, you could spend forever. Do you write yourself?
Oh, no, not really. Not fiction. I do have a piece of creative non-fiction, it could be classed as, which is coming out in an anthology at some point this year, I believe. I submitted a piece of writing and it got accepted, so that's coming out at some point this year. Okay. I do have written the odd article for Northeast Bylines, but I'm not I don't have any. I really admire writers, and I think you're all amazing, and I don't know how you do it. It's just incredible, and for me, I don't think
not your thing.
No, I would maybe think about doing a non-fiction book. There are a couple of things I'd quite like to write about, but whether it ever happens or not is a different thing.
And you mentioned that book earlier. Would you recommend that for authors to read, this Hart's Book of Rules, or is it too complex? Is there a simple guide that you would recommend people read, or just?
I would say for authors, you're probably going to end up getting bogged down in it, and I think it's probably not very interesting, because it is basically nuts and bolts. I think if you've got a decent editor and a proofreader, you can learn quite a bit through that whole process, rather than I would more go for books like, you know what, I can't remember who it's by, and it's in the other room. Books such as Story Engineering.
Oh yeah, I've got that. Yeah.
It's like, I would, if for the writing side, I would say you to go more with that, and then leave the other stuff, that's the Hart's stuff, leave that to your editor and your proofreader to sort out.
And I agree, because when I did my MA in creative writing, we did have a module on editing, and my lecturer, he was quite I mean, he was wonderful, but he's really into English and the Hart's rules, and he tried to get us. And I was just thinking, I lost the will. Please let me out of here.
Fair enough. I don't blame you.
All too much. But I mean, it was interesting, some of the stuff, and you realise how many errors you do make, and how you know absolutely nothing really about the technical side. But yeah, it was interesting, but certainly not for me. It wasn't something I would want to do myself.
I think you guys need to focus more on the creative process, and probably the more developmental side than the nuts and bolts copy editing, proofreading side. Leave that to the, that would be my advice to you.
Yeah, and I agree. If I would recommend anything to an author, it's study your tropes, know exactly, if you're writing genre fiction in particular, know exactly, we need to know what is permissible in that trope, and don't go upsetting a whole readership just because you want to be different, because many have tried it before.
And at the end of the day, you want your books to sell.
Yeah, indeed, you want and also as a reader, I'm the same. If I pick up a book, I want to know that when I pick that book up, I know what's going to be in it. I don't want major surprises. Pick up a cozy mystery, I expect that cozy mystery to be within the tropes and not be including sex and swearing and all the other things that you can put in a thriller or a contemporary romance, but that you must not ever put into a cozy mystery. So, when you're when you're proofreading, do you need to take a break? Is it something? Can you do it for hours on end, or do you do half an hour and think,
I'm going blind.
Where's the kettle?
Yeah, powered by coffee in the morning, lots of water in the afternoon. I've got a little corgi dog.
Yeah.
He gets me out of the house and away from the computer screen. You can
Yeah.
only concentrate in short amounts of time, you know.
Yeah.
So regular breaks, you know, 20 minutes, go grab a cuppa, play with the puppy for a little bit, do you know what I mean? Or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to take those breaks.
Yeah, because otherwise you're going to miss stuff, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit like when you're studying and, you know, and you're revising for exams and all the old stuff that you used to get about, you know, take regular breaks, because after a while you can only physically you can only concentrate for certain periods of time. So
yeah. Do you prefer Word? Obviously, you've mentioned Word already. So, do your editors, publishers, authors, do they all send you their manuscripts in Word?
No.
Oh, okay. You don't work in Word.
I do work in Word. I work in Word and Adobe PDF.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah, it depends very much on the publisher and what kind of publisher they are. The digital publishers will generally, you work in Word. It's a very different process for traditional publishers, especially some of the non-fiction stuff I do. I've proofread books on different bands and artists, and they all come with images. And so they're
doesn't work in Word,
edited.
does it?
No, you go to typesetter, and then you get the files that have been typeset, and that's via PDF. So very different.
And have you heard of Atticus?
No.
Okay. It's a new program. You've heard of Scrivener?
Yeah.
Well, it's similar to Scrivener and Vellum, and it basically does everything within inside the program. And my understanding is from Dave Chesson, who developed this new piece of software, that editors go inside that program, so it's all done online.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, you go into the program, but anyway, it's all fairly new. Authors and editors who prefer not to, there is still the ability to download it into Word and send it to an editor. But his vision is that you know how you have, well, you probably don't, but I as an author have about 4 different versions.
Right.
And it's to stop you, if you're not good at naming conventions, it's to stop you thinking which is the final manuscript. I need to make a change and I don't know which it is, because authors aren't always good at naming conventions. So it's to help them with that sort of thing. So it's all in that one version and it doesn't ever move.
It's amazing how much technology is involved in it, isn't it, really? And the different things you need to get to grips with. I think I'm quite lucky that at the moment all I have to deal with is Word and PDF.
Yeah. I mean, when you read a book, you just think, oh, this book just magically appears, don't you? And you don't realise how many processes it has to go through before it ends up in that final format. So that's been really interesting. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So just for the readers who watch this show, do you have a book that you would recommend?
I probably will stay away from books I've worked on because, like you say...
Yeah, you don't want to offend anyone.
Didn't
mention my book.
Fine.
I'm not paying her again.
I think a book that sticks in my mind that I read quite recently, Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. Very sort of character driven, but you're not quite sure who you can rely on. That whole... Yeah, so that's probably a book I would recommend at the moment. Can I add another?
Yeah, go on. Yeah, of course you can.
Actually, this was one that I read on. No, I didn't. I listened to on Audible. First Day of Spring by Nancy Tucker.
Okay.
Again, another psychological thriller. It's dual timeline. About quite, again, I don't know what's the matter with me. Veering very much on the dark side. Looking at from the perspective of a child who kills another child. Kind of, obviously I live in the northeast. You could see it was influenced very much by the Mary Bell case, which was a young girl who I think it was in the 60s, and it's just the writing. It's that kind of brutal, and it's really dark, but at the same time it's really beautiful, if that makes sense. To be able to kind of pull that off, and also to get the sympathy is
to get you to sympathise with the murderer, it's quite an achievement, isn't it?
Absolutely. So yeah, 2 books I'd definitely recommend.
Okay, so Abbie is definitely on the dark side of things.
But I am
yeah, but she's a very nice person and a very good proofreader. So anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you, Abbie.
Oh, thank you.
So thanks for coming on the show.
It's been great. Thank you very much.
So that was an interesting interview with Abbie Rutherford. So just so you know, proofreading is not an optional extra. It's a vital part of producing a good book. And obviously, every reader who buys a book deserves to have the best that you can produce. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the All Things Book Show. If you have, please like and comment if you've got anything to say, and do subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time.